Today we are going live to talk about dumb things builders say during contract negotiations.
Are you an Aussie tradie and your paperwork is shady? Do the dockers farm side keep you up late at night? Are you sick of pushing paper? Swinging your tools is more you caper. Call us the tricks of your trade.
Welcome to the Tricks of Your Trade podcast, where we talk about trade business topics to help you get through business life unscathed.
Does the builder pay you late and your cash flow fluctuates? Do you dread the office work? Can't afford a full-time clerk? Consider working smarter. Don't be a business martyr. Call us the tricks of your trade.
Hello, welcome to the Tricks of Your Trade podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Serson, construction lawyer, adjudicator, and director of Tricks of Your Trade. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me. And today we are going live to talk about dumb things builders say during contract negotiations. So I have to preface that with, we are not just here to talk about dumb things builders say, because we'd be here forever. It's joking. I'm joking. Please don't hate me for saying that. But we are constantly greeted with these pushbacks during contract negotiations. And it's something that subcontractors really struggle to know what to say because it can be very frustrating. And when you get frustrated in a contract negotiation, you get weary. And sometimes you can get a little bit short with the way that you speak with people. So I wanted to bring up what the main dumb things builders say to me during contracts negotiations and how I respond to them, because it might give you a little bit of a better starting point if you can keep calm, not be offended by these things, and have some go-to strategies in terms of what you would say back. So the first one was actually suggested to me when I scheduled this live video. So it's standard. This is a standard term. And another rendition of that is it's industry standard. In terms of saying, hey, this is standard, normally what the builder is saying is this is a standard clause from the Australian standard contract, or they could be saying this is industry standard, this is the way it's always done. Now, whenever builders say things like that to me, it's always very frustrating because it's very rare that you're actually looking at an Australian standard unamended contract. And as for industry standard, can someone please show me where the book is? There is no industry standard reference that I'm aware of that you can go back and look at and go, well, I should be having to sign a director's guarantee because it's what the standard says. This standard doesn't make any sense in the context of a negotiation or even any kind of contractual transaction, because you need to make sure the shoe fits for the contract document you've got. So when a builder says to you, hey, this is standard, what I like to do is point out logically why it's actually not standard. And the easiest way to do that is usually to just say, hey, this is not an Australian standard contract. Are you saying this is an unamended Australian standard contract? And suddenly you'll see them go, oh, no, it's not a standard unamended Australian standard contract, because very rarely do builders actually even use the unamended Australian standard contract. Very, very, very rarely. Normally they are 3 or 4 times the size because lawyers have changed them so much. So when the builder says to you, this is standard, you need to give them a logical reason why it's not actually suitable for you to agree to that contract term. So I use the director's guarantee as an example. And what I normally say in that situation is, hey, it might be appropriate for the contract template to have that clause in there so that if it's needed, it can be used. But it doesn't make sense for us to have to give one because we're being paid in arrears. And normally it's the party who gives the line of credit that gets the director's guarantee from the other party. And if we're being paid in arrears, really, we're giving you a line of credit. So it's not really applicable in this situation that I give you one, because you're not giving me any credit. You're actually holding retention and I'm being paid in arrears. So that usually will get that across the line. Now, the other one that I've been seeing a lot of, which is actually really amusing, is we can't change definitions. And I get it all the time. We can't change definitions in contracts. Yes, you can. You can change anything in a contract. The way that they have got the contract set up, it might have more of an impact on other areas in the contract if they say, oh, we can't change definitions because there would be a flow-on effect. Now, usually what needs to happen when a builder is pushing back saying, hey, I can't change the definitions, what they're really saying is, I don't know what the consequences of that change will be. So they might be uneasy that by tweaking that one thing, there could be unintended consequences elsewhere in the contract. So what I usually say to them is, look, and it needs to be applicable that this is the case, but what I'd normally say to them is, we're on the same page anyway. If it's just that you don't want to make the change in the definitions, why don't we have a special condition that covers that? That you really do need to make sure that the order of precedence in the contract would mean that your special conditions would override your general conditions. Sometimes it can be that you can adjust things in the scope of work to very clearly particularize or explain what you will and will not do. So that's what I usually say in that situation is, if you're on the same page and they're just saying, oh, we can't make a change to definitions, I'm not comfortable making a change to definitions, find another practical way that can be changed within the contract. The next one is, this is going to take too long. So I've had this with a couple of very, very big builders recently, where I've sent them a departure schedule ahead of time. We have got onto a Teams meeting and they've had a cast of thousands from the building company sitting there wanting to have a negotiation over the contract terms. And the first thing they say is, well, we're clearly not going to get through all this today. I'm like, well, why don't we make more time? I think we can get it done today. And what I usually say in that situation, what they're effectively trying to say to you is, I'm not even going to discuss all this with you. I just want you to agree with me that you're doing the job and I want a commitment from you, and we'll work out the argy-bargy back and forth later. What I usually say in that situation is, look, I know there's a lot in the departure schedule, but if you actually look at what's in here, it's just 5 or 6 main key issues. So if we can agree on those issues, then all of these other ones will fall away. So what I do then is I know usually when I go into a contract negotiation and we've got a 100-line departure schedule, I will have a list of what issues we're covering. So when you go in, you can say, look, we actually only need to talk about extensions of time and liquidated damages, insurances, margin on variations, and there's a director's guarantee in there I want crossed out. So oftentimes you can actually have those conversations, but in some instances, it will be tempting to agree with the builder and say, look, let's not spend 4 hours going through line by line by line. You might be able to use that time productively to have a conversation about the issues and say, let's agree in principle that it's going to be $4,000 a day LDs capped at 5% of the contract sum, practical completion date to be X based on this program, and LDs will run from the PC date, not from milestones. You can have that in a good bloke conversation without having to go through and look at the 6 or 7 different places in the contract that needs to be addressed, and that will speed things up for you as well. The next one that I think most subcontractors get at least once in every contract negotiation is, it's not relevant, so it can just stay. It's like, well, if it's not relevant, why don't you just cross it out? Like, if you're not actually giving up anything, you should be comfortable with taking that away. So what I always want to say to builders in that situation, this is my ranty, I wish they knew how silly and absurd that actually is that, look, if you've ever worked a day in business in your life, if you're talking to a staffer, and they're saying, look, if it's not relevant, you can just leave it in. It's like, well, actually, if you've ever worked a day in business in your life, you would know that when I take on risk like this, there's actual consequences. It might not be you that I'm talking to in 12 months when somebody tries to use this clause on me. They weren't here for that conversation. So that's what I always want to say. But I don't normally say that in that situation. What I say to them is, listen, it sounds like we're on the same page that this is not going to come into play. You would appreciate that it's going to make me nervous keeping it in there. It would mean a lot to me if we could just cross it out. Most of the time you will get it crossed out. And if the builder pushes back on you and says, no, it's not relevant, so it's got to stay, I would say, hey, if you're not planning on using that on me, how come you want to keep it in? And frame it as a question and then do the awkward silence pause afterwards, because you really want to make that person sit in that awkward realization. They're telling you with their words they're not going to use that on you, but their actions are telling you that they're reserving their rights. So you do need to actually make sure you cover that off properly. The next one is, we would never do that, but we won't cross it out. A little bit like the one before, it's not relevant, so it can just stay. But in this instance, they're saying, No, we would never do that. We don't do things like that. The contract lives in the drawer. We only ever bring the contract out if there's an issue. That's where you need to articulate to them, actually, by saying that you're telling me that you're reserving your right to be able to use that on me later, some later time. We're right here, right now. Why don't we just have a conversation about how that would play out? And sometimes I'll even frame it around and say to the builder, can you give me an example of where that might actually come into play? And if they can give you an example, oftentimes you'll see that by letting them talk, they'll talk themselves into a situation where they start to divulge things to you about circumstances where they have used that particular clause before on somebody else. And that's where you can say, hey, it just makes me really uncomfortable leaving it in. I don't even call them out for saying I've used it on somebody else in the past. I would just say, look, it just makes me really uncomfortable having that in there. If we're both on the same page, it'd be great all the same if I could just get that one crossed out. So, dumb things builders say in contract negotiations, when you are met with something absurd, or if the builder is saying they want you to do something that's not possible, articulating that something is actually impossible can be one of the most powerful moments in a negotiation, because the penny drops for that person that you're not just saying, I don't want to, or it's too hard, or I can't be bothered. You're saying, no matter what I do, I cannot make that happen for you. And I just need to be upfront with you about that from the start and let you know that that's not going to be a reality. So bear that in mind when you are having your contract negotiations with your builder, that oftentimes you're not dealing with somebody who has a lot of negotiation training. You might be dealing with somebody who hasn't even read the entire contract. And look, I was a law student when I was a contracts administrator, and for more years went by for me being a contract administrator than after I'd read the contract. I hadn't actually even read our entire contract until about a year before I left that building company. So don't always assume that these people are contracts experts. All they want to do is get you past the next point in their trade letting schedule and hope you don't come back asking for more money. So in terms of being a builder's CA, I don't even remember anything in the construction management degree that actually gave cadets or construction management graduates proper negotiation training. I don't think it existed in the curriculum. So don't assume that the person that you're dealing with does actually have any negotiation training. So that is my live for today. Tomorrow, I am going to be going live from City Hall in Brisbane. I have not yet worked out how to make my tech do that to multiple platforms. I'm hoping that I can pull it off somehow. But tomorrow I'm going to be going live from City Hall because I want to talk to you about the reasons that I know that staff of building companies don't want this process to work this way anymore. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole now because we'll just go and do a whole nother live right now. But the purpose of these lives is to get you guys thinking and to get you talking, hopefully, about the different ways that we can approach things during our contract negotiations, because a lot of people have said to me, look, this is never going to change. Like, the industry's not going to change, Michelle. It's been done this way for so long. And I would challenge everyone on that, because I've got young family members who are growing up in a world that will not tolerate the way that things have been done in other generations. So if you look at the old guard and the way that we did things in construction, I don't think the younger generation, I'm not going to say they're precious, I'm just going to say they're enlightened and they don't take crap. There's a good chance that they're not going to put up with this stuff in the construction industry. So the way that we're contracting, it won't be that there's outrage and that people are held to account. I think they just won't enter the industry. They'll just go, why would I do that? That doesn't sound like a great job. Bear in mind that there are kids out there these days that are being paid six-figure salaries to play Xbox games on YouTube and do all sorts of influencer type jobs. So we have to look realistically at what is going on with the way that our youth are growing up and the types of people who are coming into the industry and the people who are going to move forward and start doing these deals. So if you think about plastering companies in 15 years, tiling companies, concreters, where are these kids going to come from who are going to be starting these businesses or taking over these businesses? And The reason I know this is such a big deal is because quite a lot of my clients from decades that have been in touch for decades are coming up to the point where they want to retire. Kids have zero interest in taking over those businesses. So I think the key thing here is it is actually our responsibility that this is going to have to be the generation that sort of transforms the way things are done so that the industry can still be resourced. Because the way that contracting is taking place, it just won't be tolerated by younger generations. And people won't go into business doing those types of things. So that's the purpose of me going live this week. The other purpose is to let you know about my negotiation school. So yesterday we did our webinar for Negotiation School Launch Week, and it was how to get the builder to say yes to your contract departure. So we talked about some of the things I spoke about in the live today, and we talked about in the webinar yesterday. But we had 68 people turn up to the webinar, and everyone stayed to the end. It was incredible. And the engagement was really fantastic as well. So there's so much information here that I know subcontractors are hungry for. I love to be able to provide it for free as much as I possibly can. If you really like my content on social media and it's free content, imagine how good it is when I know the builders aren't watching.
If you have any questions about what I've talked about on this podcast, feel free to drop me a good old-fashioned email at questions@tricksofyourtrade.com.au. If you would like a systematic approach to your contract administration and getting paid, head on over to our website and check out the Subbies Toolbox. You won't be disappointed there. And just one last time, our web address is www.tricksofyourtrade.com.au.
Are you an Aussie tradie and your paperwork is shady? Do the dockers farm side keep you up late at night? Are you sick of pushing paper, swinging your tools more you caper? Call us the tricks of your trade.
Welcome to the Tricks of Your Trade podcast, where we talk about trade business topics to help you get through business life unscathed.
Does the builder pay you late and your cash flow fluctuates? Do you dread the office work? Can't afford a full-time clerk? Consider working smarter. Don't be a business martyr. Call us the tricks of your trade.